This video will help you set up your Logos software for use with your Greek New Testament. Here are some of the skills that this video will bring to you. First, learning to locate and then open your Logos resources. Arranging them on your screen for optimal use. This involves sizing them, and moving tabs. Learning to cluster related resources so they operate in a coordinated fashion. This is called linking. You'll learn how to prioritize resources. This is helpful for looking up words in the lexica. Adjusting font size on individual resources. Sometimes the resources open with unwanted markup, and we'll show you how to clear that. Resources come with tables of contents. We'll show you how to locate, either display or hide those. Sometimes it's helpful to focus on one window and be able to see that in full dimension. That's called floating the window. We'll show you how to do that. And then to reverse the process, which they call docking the window, putting it into its original location. Finally, we'll show you how to save the workspace that you've worked so hard to arrange so that you can easily retrieve it and use it again in a future session. Before opening Logos and beginning to open up some of the resources, let's look at the intended goal. What can often be a very optimal and useful layout is arranging three kinds of resources in this particular fashion, three quadrants as it were. In the upper left is a good place to locate your Greek New Testament, and then your lexica on the right. An English Bible is helpful to have available often to check your translation, although there will be some times when it'll be wise to shut down or close your English Bible so that you do not use it as a crutch, but rather generate your initial translation without reference to the English Bible. Let's turn now to the Logos software. Initially, you'll probably see a display somewhat like this. The exact content will be different. This is the institutional homepage. Here, Logos presents advertisements. Sometimes they're for sale. Items sometimes are free. And there may be training tools. This is not where you will generally do your work, however. This is their homepage, and if you want to go back to it, notice in the upper left it's labeled Home. There's the icon of a house. We're interested in the icon just to the right of that, the spines of three books, as it were, set up. If you click on that, what will drop down then are resources available to you. Your collection of available resources will be different than mine because I have a different package. We'll begin by typing in Greek New Testament so that the Greek New Testament resource will become available to us. Even without pressing the Enter key, already Logos begins to spill out various resources that it associates with the three words Greek New Testament. The particular actual Greek New Testament we're interested in is the SBL, Society for Biblical Literature. It's possible that appears in the first collection or the first display. In my case, I have to scroll down a bit in order to locate it. Here it is, the Greek New Testament, SBL edition. Let's click on that. And now it's opened up. In my case, it defaults to the left half of the window. It anticipates I'm going to want to have some other resource. Let's then move to open up a couple of lexica. To do that, we'll again click on the library icon in the upper left. The first will be a Greek lexicon that was edited by Thayer, Thayer. The resources associated with that name that I'm offered are Enhanced Strong's Lexicon. That's not the one I'm looking for. Also a Greek English lexicon in the New Testament. You notice over in the author column there to the right, That one's authored by Joseph Henry Thayer. Let's click on that title and see what happens. Logos presents that to fill the other side of the window. We're not so concerned where they land right now. We just want to get them out and to active. While we're at it, let's open another lexicon, the Liddell and Scott, Liddel and Scott. A couple of resources are offered to me, a Greek-English lexicon and then an intermediate. It's the Greek-English lexicon that I'm interested in, even though Liddell was author of each. So we'll click on a Greek-English lexicon. Now, we still have the overall screen divided into two panels or two windows. The most recent resource has been placed over on the right. We're going to shuffle these a little bit later, but let's just acknowledge that's where it is. Incidentally, if you're wondering which of the two overlaying resources for the Greek-English lexicon by Liddell and Scott is overlaying, as it happens right now, the Greek New Testament SBL edition. You see these two tabs. The way you can tell which one is active is, if you can't tell from the content, is notice the orange line across the top. That's the active one. If we click, for example, on the tab for Greek New Testament, then, not surprising, the other one recedes, and now the Greek New Testament comes to the fore. All right, so far we've got two lexica. They happen to be showing up in different halves of the page, and we have a Greek New Testament. Let's add some English Bibles, shall we? Go to the library. Let's type in New Revised Standard, NRSV. And there, that's appeared. How about NIV? There's the NIV, looks like the 1998. That's a reader's version for early readers. I'm not interested in that. Let's go with the 1984. And let's be sure and get New American Standard, NASB. The one that has no special designation, the top one on my list, happens to be the most recent, the 2020. And now let's move them around so that we can achieve that three-window pattern with Greek New Testament upper left, Greek Lexica half of the window on the right, and then English Bibles on the lower left. Here's our Greek New Testament. Let's click on that, brings it to the surface. In order to move that, we'll take the tab and drag it. And I'm dragging it over to the left. Notice how it's gray in the upper left half. That's actually where I want to release it. But before I do so, let me just drag it down lower and watch what happens. If I drag it down lower, it shades left the entire left half. So if I were to release my mouse right now, it would occupy the left half. I actually want it to occupy the upper left. So I push my, my mouse a little bit up, and now I'll release. The fact that it's not displaying it right now is not an issue. It'll display after I release. All right, notice the transition. Greek New Testament is in the upper left, and it happens to be solo. It's pushed everything else that was on the left side down to a lower half. That's actually fortuitous, isn't it? Because notice that we wanted English Bibles to be in the lower left. New American Standard is there. New Revised Standard is there. But a Greek English lexicon is also there. I don't want that there. So again, clicking on the tab, not the field, not the document itself, but on the tab. There we go. Clicking and dragging. I'm going to drag that over to the right. So I want my lexica to all be on the right. I don't want it in this position as a kind of a vertical stripe. I want it to occupy all of the right half. And now I'll release. And there it is. Greek English Lexicon in the New Testament. That was there. It's there. And we've left behind NRSV and NASB in the lower right. So on the right, we have Greek English Lexicon, New International Version. That's one of our English Bibles. We want to move that to the lower left. So clicking and dragging the tab, we want to drag it around until the point where the region of the gray matches the region where the other English Bibles were, and we'll release. We have now achieved the layout that we desired. We have our Greek New Testament in the upper left, beneath it English Bibles, and then the right half devoted to Greek Lexica. After selecting and opening a resource, Logos is designed to let you utilize that resource in one of two ways. Either you can use it over the internet, or you can download it to your computer. By default, you will be using it over the internet. This saves space on your hard drive. For some resources, you will find it sufficient to access them over the internet. However, to enjoy full functionality, it will be important that you actually download the fundamental resources shown in this video. That is, a Greek New Testament, 2 Lexica, and 1 or 2 English Bibles. Otherwise, as you attempt to imitate some of the setup shown in this video, such as prioritizing resources, you'll discover that your interface will not offer the options shown here. So be sure to download the basic resources referred to in this video, a Greek New Testament, 2 Lexica, and 1 or 2 English Bibles. So far, we've learned to locate and open Logos resources from your library, and we've learned how to arrange the layout for optimal use. Let's now learn how to link a set, that is a cluster of related resources, so that they track together. Most obvious here will be the Bibles that we want to track with each other, so that when we move from one book of the Bible or chapter or verse in one, it will track in the other Bibles that we have open. This is an option. It's not required. However, generally it will be very, very useful. To illustrate this, let's arrange for one set of resources, the English Bibles, all to track with each other. I'll begin by clicking on the tab for New American Standard, so that becomes the active one. What we'll do now is to click on the stacked 3 dots that are opposite the scripture citation window off to the right. So if I left click, so if I right click on that stack of dots, then an interaction panel appears, and notice just under Find, notice Link Set. In order to establish a name for the cluster of resources that I want to track with each other, what I'll do is click on one of these letters, A through F. Let's go ahead and start with A. I click on A, that panel disappears, but notice that an orange square with the letter A now appears to the right of that resource. Right now, that's the only one that is linked. In other words, it's linked just in essence to itself. That doesn't particularly help us. Let's select another resource. So let's pick another Bible, the New American or New International Version. Clicking on that tab makes it the active window. And now right-click on the triple dots associated with that resource. The same panel opens up. What we want to do is assign the same letter, the same set title to it. So we'll click A for that. And now New American Standard and NIV will track with each other. We'll go ahead and apply this to the NRSV and then illustrate how it works. Click on the NRSV, left click on the triple dots, and use the same link set title, letter A. Now these are moving together. Let's demonstrate that. We will direct the active window, the NRSV, to a particular site. Let's, why don't we put it at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5. Incidentally, the citation input is fairly forgiving. You'll notice I just did Matt for Matthew. I didn't bother with a period. That's okay. 5, I don't need to indicate the verse unless I want it to move to something other than the first verse. We'll enter that, and now it moves directly to Matthew 5:1. That's the NRSV. Prior to that, it was somewhere around John, 1 John, wasn't it? Something like this. Let's click on NIV and see where it is. It's also at Matthew 5:1, as indicated in the window, and also you can see the 5. Matthew is also indicated here, chapter 5, and a section title is provided. Not surprisingly, when we click on NASB, it's also at Matthew 5:1. Here's one more link that can be useful. How about the Greek? Currently it's in 2 Peter. If we want it to track with the English or vice versa, have the English track with it, you know what to do. Click on the triple dots for the Greek New Testament and go to link set, click on A. And now it has advanced to Matthew 5. If I were simply to scroll in clicking on the Greek New Testament, and I'm going to scroll down just using the roller button on my mouse, notice as I roll down that the English is keeping track. So in this fashion, I have linked these together. What if you want to decouple something? Perhaps you want to have NASB open to some other site and you want it to remain stable even though you change your Greek. Maybe you want to look up something in John's Gospel while you're studying the Greek in Matthew's Gospel, and you don't want the English in John's Gospel and NASB to move around. You want it to switch back to the Matthew. So what you'll do is go back to the triple dots again, and if you click on None, let's get that overlay to disappear. There we go. Click on None. That will erase the link for that resource. Restore it by clicking on the A. Since there are several sets that you can cluster together, A through F, you can appreciate that you could have them running, you could have several clusters of resources that are running on different tracks. Next, we'll learn what's called prioritizing resources. Initially, one of the greatest assets offered by Logos software will be your ability to locate the correct definition of a word, the correct entry in a lexica for a word that you're wanting to study or a word that you simply don't know. To illustrate this, let's go to a target passage, Matthew 6:33, and we'll show you how to look up a word. In order to look it up effectively, you'll want to have your resources prioritized. To navigate, go to the window where you see the Bible chapter and verse listed. Type in Matthew 6:33 and enter. Let's suppose you're interested in looking up the word seek in the phrase, seek first the kingdom of God. Here you see verse 33. Happens that seek is the first word in that sentence, even in the Greek order. To look up a word, what we'll want to do is hover over the word and then right-click with your mouse. Again, right-click. When we right-click with the mouse, what will display is something that looks like this. We're interested now in the lower right zone, what appears associated with the heading Look Up. Opposite that, you'll find a down arrow. When you press the down arrow, it will expand and display more information associated with Look Up. Right now, since my system is set up with prioritized resources, I am offered several lexica that are ready for me to open up and track down a meaning associated with the word seek. To appreciate the value of prioritizing resources, notice then what happens when I click on one of these associated or prioritized lexica. LSJ stands for Liddell and Scott and Jones. I'm already keyed in on that Zetao, or Zetete as it's pronounced, seek. When I click on the LSJ under lookup, notice what happens on the right. It has recognized that I want to work in the LSJ, the Liddell and Scott resource, so it's brought this to the fore, and it has turned from whatever entry I was looking at previously to Zetao, the appropriate entry. If we go back to the Greek New Testament and click instead on the Gelnet resource under lookup, notice again what happens on the right. Here it turns now to the Gelnet resource and opens to Zetao. It's very possible that your particular setup right now is not offering any, or it may offer a different collection of resources under lookup. Let's now show you how to ensure that Liddell and Scott or Thayer show up under that lookup portion. The way to do that, let's go back to Library, far upper left, the third icon, the one with the 3 spines of books. Click on that, and now we're going to want to enter those resources in order to locate them in the interaction panel. Let's start with Liddell and Scott. We'll type in Liddel, Liddell and Scott, and as you may recall, it's the top entry, which is the actual lexicon. This is already active within our windows, so we're not commanding it to perform that, to come out of the collection and become part of our active library. What we're wanting to do now is to prioritize that. The way to do that is to right-click on the resource in this library dropdown. Again, right-click on the resource. A little ways down in the drop-down, you'll see the wording, the opportunity to prioritize this resource. Prioritize this resource. That's what we want to do. Left-click on that. And now you see the heading Prefer these resources. What you see now is a listing of prioritization. This is not an alphabetical listing. This is not just a general catalog. It's actually reflecting what it thinks you want as priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. You can see as it happens with mine, already LSJ is at the top of the list. Perhaps with yours, 2 things may be different. One, probably you only have a couple or maybe 3 at most related resources. These are resources that, according to its internal algorithm, Logos feels are related to the whole enterprise that the lexicon, Liddell and Scott, is related to. What you want to do is wherever LSJ shows up in the list, I'm going to left-click on it just to show how you move it. Just left-click, and you can drag it. So if your LSJ is perhaps somewhere down here, several down, click on it and then drag it up to the top and release. Let's repeat that with Thayer. So once again, in the resource name, we'll type Thayer and enter. And in this case, it would have been not the Enhanced Strong's Lexicon, but the Greek English Lexicon that we want to pay attention to. Just to be sure that the Prefer option is operating properly, let's right-click on the title we're interested in and click Prioritize. Notice that then on the right, still the heading Prefer these resources does appear. That's the action that we want to engage. And now it has gray shaded the resource that's titled A Greek English Lexicon. Left-click on that resource and then drag it up to position number 2. And that's all that you have to do. We can get out of this panel simply by clicking on some field outside it. Now, as you return to that the word search lexicon search function, hovering over the word, and then right-click. And if you move to the lookup portion of the interaction panel, once again, be sure that it is displaying, that's with the chevron on the right, be sure it's displaying resources. You should see Liddell and Scott, and you should see Galnet. There may be some others that will show up too, but at least you've got those. This is the most reliable way. Hovering over Word and right-click, and then moving to the lookup zone, this is the most reliable way to get to the correct entry in your lexicon. In the next few minutes, we'll show you how to adjust the font size for any given resource, how to clear up unwanted markup, how to either display or hide table of contents, and how to what's called float or dock windows, that is, give them independent and movable status. Let's start with adjusting the font size. In any given resource that's displayed, click on that resource and then go to the upper right where you see the 3 stacked dots. By right-clicking on these dots, the first piece of information that shows up is a sliding scale with a small a on one side and a large A on the other. All you need to do is click and drag the little sliding piece in order to change the font size. Right now the active window was the Greek New Testament. Notice I'm moving that slider to the right. When I release, wherever I release, and then click off of that interaction panel, you'll see that it has changed the display, the font size. You can do the same thing over with the Lexica or any resource. So now I've clicked on the Galnet in the far right. I'm opening what's called the menu, that panel's menu. Left click on the triple dots and then drag the bar for the font size and release. Those are a little bit too large for regular use, so I'm going to return them to where they were earlier. Next, let's look at the matter of clearing up unwanted markup. Sometimes when you open a resource, you will find some clutter, some underscoring or highlighting or particular icons that show up right within the text itself. Let me demonstrate. I'll go to the library and open up another Bible. Let's open up the ESV, English Standard Version. This is opened up in the lower left. Do you notice that there are many verses where there are underscorings? These are notes that indicate other people, people such as yourself, who have looked at this, have made some notes or highlights because they felt it was an important verse. There may be some point in your study where you'll be interested in what is the popular opinion concerning a given passage. Personally, I find this an uninvited clutter, so I like to turn these off so they don't distract me. The way to turn them off is to go to the right of the scripture site, the scripture address. You'll see a magnifying glass, and then you see a cluster of 3 balls, like 3 stacked bowling balls. This is what Logos calls its visual filters. What you're looking at is a version or a presentation, a display of the ESV with filters showing. We want these filters to be removed. Right-click on the triple balls and it will give you a drop-down. The popular highlights is what's causing this, the current list of dotted underscorings. So currently it's selected. I'm going to click on that to deselect it. As soon as I did, notice that those disappeared. So once again, triple dots and popular highlights. If you want to restore them, just click them and they'll show. Click again and they disappear. It's possible that the corresponding words is activated. What this does is, let's just click on one of the words now. Notice I clicked on the word pronounce in Matthew 7:1, and suddenly a number of highlights showed up that, according to an algorithm within Logos, it feels are related. There are some times when this function is useful. If you're at a stage of your study where it's not useful, you want to know how to turn it off. It's visual filters corresponding words. If we deselect it, return to the text, and start clicking on words, you will see that it doesn't cause corresponding words to be ignited or illuminated. There's another markup that you may want to be aware of for turning on or off, and it has to do with a speaker label. To get an example of this, let's back up into Matthew 4. Here is the temptation of Jesus. It's a conversation between Jesus and the devil. Return to the visual filters, the three stacked balls, left click. And under resources, this heading, resource, click on speaker labels if it's not already switched on. I'm going to need to enlarge the font for you to see this clearly. And now notice that in Matthew 4:4, just ahead of the quotation, the statement, "It is written," a little megaphone has appeared. Hover over that and it tells you what the editors of Logos feel is the individual responsible for the speaking, the discourse that follows. Jesus Christ is the speaker here. Let's go down to verse 6 where we have a change in speaker. It reads that someone, namely the devil from verse 5, said to him, quote, "If you are the Son of God," hover over the megaphone which appears there, and the Logos editors make sure we realize who's speaking here. It's Satan. This is what's meant by speaker labels. Personally, I find these distracting. They interfere with my ability to concentrate on the words themselves, so I prefer to have those turned off. The way to do that is by right-clicking Visual Filters, under the heading Resource, scroll down to Speaker Labels, and deselect it. Next, let's show you how to display or hide the tables of contents that are associated with the various resources. This is a helpful tool that Logos includes. Notice the panel on the right where you see Gelnet. You're informed with this gray column that you're given the table of contents. Currently, it happens to be located in the iota collection of words, hierus, for example. If we're interested in going to one of these words and looking it up, all we have to do is click on it. I'm going to click on hierus, the top one, and it goes immediately to that entry. The way to navigate that is a sidebar, and here we can move to other letters of the alphabet. We can collapse them. Notice what will happen next to the capital iota, collapsing that. Let's suppose I wanted to look up something under the letter sigma. Perhaps there's a word I'm looking for. This won't be your routine way of finding a word, but sometimes it can be useful. Let's suppose I want to look up the word mouth, stoma. Here it is. What's given initially is, as it were, a cluster or a consecutive listing of words starting with stoma and going to strutheon, a word I'm not acquainted with. If I want stoma particularly, just expand that and then click on stoma and it shows up. There will be times when in your study you don't need to, in essence, waste space on this table of contents column. In order to make it disappear, go up to the triple horizontal lines that are just left of the word search window. Click on that triple horizontal, as I've just done, left click, and you see the table of contents disappear. At any time, you can make that table of contents reappear by clicking on those 3 stacked lines. Next, let's learn how to do what's called floating or docking windows. Let's suppose you're deep into a study, and while on the one hand you want to have this lexical entry, stoma, available to you, you want something else visible underneath it. And you would like to have that window that's showing Gelnet, something that you can either move in, move out, resize, and so forth without it affecting other windows. That's called floating the window, making it dissociate or disconnect from the other windows. The way to do that is to open the panels menu. This is the vertically stacked 3 dots. Left click on that, and then in the lower 25%, you'll see an option called Float This Panel. Float this panel. Notice what happens when we left click that. Now that resource, Gelnet, and that entry have assumed a life of their own, and I'm able to move them around. Notice that it no longer appears in the right portion, the right half of the Logos panel or window proper. All that's left is the Liddell and Scott resource. I can size this and move it around in order to expose other things underneath. If I've finished with that, with having it in a floated pattern, click on the vertical 3 dots, and roughly in the same place where it initially offered floating the panel, I'm now offered the opportunity to dock the panel. Click on that and it will assign it a position within my collection. This time I see that it opted to assign it at its point of origin, that is, occupying half of the right-hand portion. Sometimes it will dock it in a place that it didn't originate from. So for example, it might overlay the Greek New Testament in the 25% upper left or in the 25% lower left. If you see that happen, you know how to drag the tab and move it over. Drag the tab and move it where you want. We're coming to the close of our instructions. Let's finish by showing you how to save your layout or your workspace so you can access it later. The instruction to save your layout is executed by coming to the upper right of your overall windows. You see a series of icons, one of which is a cluster of rectangles. If you hover over it, it's called Layout. Layout is Logos term for the arrangement of your windows. Sometimes they call them the tiles, individual tiles. So if you left click on that icon of the triple rectangles, you'll see this drop down. What we're interested in right now is the upper right. There's a grayed portion that shows you a miniaturized screenshot of your current workspace. And then it has the label Now. It's just announcing to you what you have open right now is what this particular grade zone is going to act on. In your initial saving, what you'll want to do is save as a named layout. This allows you to take your current workspace and assign it a name. So let's click on that. Now we have the opportunity to give it a name. What would you like it to be called? Shall we call it routine layout, perhaps? And now we're going to hit the return, the enter bar, and notice that that has moved down 1 layer. Here's what's also useful. The left-hand half of this interaction panel gives you some headings, some of which are pre-selected. Quick Start Layouts, Bible and Commentary. These are ones that are offered by Logos. towards the bottom, you see saved layouts. If it's not listing any, then you'll want to click the down display, the expansion layer. I have a number already. Let's see if the one we just named called routine layout now appears. These are in alphabetical order. Yes, there it is, routine layout. So if Logos doesn't automatically restart with your last layout, that's what it will generally do. If you shut down Logos, it saves its layout, and whatever was your configuration last, it will conveniently reopen with it. If for some reason it doesn't, you want to go to the triple rectangles, the layout, go over to the left column under Saved Layouts, and find the name of that one. Over time, you will find yourself doing particular tasks where you'll want a different layout with a different name. So moving between them is achieved by clicking on one of the saved layouts. The other feature on this page that's useful to know about, now we're focusing on the grade portion in the upper right under the heading Now. Beneath the label Save as Named Layout, notice that it says it offers you to update active. What's active? Well, right now what's active is the layout that I've called routine layout. Suppose I go back and I make some changes. Maybe I open a new resource, or maybe I close a resource. Maybe I'm not interested in English Standard Version. Incidentally, the way to close a resource is the X on that tab. This won't remove it from your library. It just removes it from your workspace, current workspace. Maybe this is a change in my routine workspace that I want to regularize. So now we'll go back to the now of the layouts, and if I update active, that will take the current one, which is my called routine layout, and it will now save the current version, which is that version without the English Standard. I hope you found this video useful. Admittedly, on first glance, it's a lot of information. You may want to review it from time to time or dip in to selected portions just to refresh your memory on how to execute routine functions within Logos. And don't forget to download selected resources to enjoy maximum functionality.